We've gone through the day, started out pretty broad, then we went into collaboration between the various sectors. Then we just witnessed a panel on recycle, reuse, and talk about some actionable business models and practices that are coming into place. So we reach sort of the point where we want to highlight specific actionable solutions that are going on. And this year we're focusing on the treatment sector. And as we did in previous years, we have some background that will be provided by one of the operating partners here at Sciens, Tom Rooney. And then we will move into a more in-depth discussion with Bill Becker from Hazen and Sawyer, as well as Alex Buehler, who is the president and CEO of a water treatment business called Integrated Water Services, who will talk to us about what he's doing. But the main frame here is, as we did in the past, that consolidation is necessary. There are actionable solutions that are happening right now, and we hope to sort of give you a few of those solutions and those algorithms as you walk out of here today. So with that, I'll pass it off to Tom.
Thank you, Alex. As Alex said, my name is Tom Rooney. I'm an operating partner with Sciens. I've been in the water industry for 20 years. Doesn't seem like it. But so what we're going to talk about today is drive home a little bit of what everybody already knows about systems being in difficult disrepair. But if you listen to what we're going to talk about, it's going to be a subset of the water sector that is sort of a stranded group that is neither large enough to gain attention nor small enough to not be a problem. So with that, all right. So first, let me, and I'm just going to lay the groundwork, and most of the heavy lifting in this presentation is going to be by Bill and Alex. But the background here is really about the profound fragmentation in the water space. And what do I mean by that? Well, the best way I think I can put this to you is the water is provided in the United States by a significant number of water providers. If you look at the United Kingdom, it's 1/5 of the population of the United States, but there are really only about 12 key players that drive the water in the UK, 12. The United States, we have 50,000 or thereabouts. And if you add sewage treatment, depending on how you count it, it's another 40-some thousand. So you're talking about 2 to 3 orders of magnitude off. In other words, 1,000 times more fragmented per capita than France. And that's at the heart of what we're going to talk about today. Because for every New York City or San Francisco or Chicago, by virtue of the fact that there are thousands of these, there will be hundreds of stranded, smaller players facing similar situations, but they don't have the resources to handle those. So what are the situations? Well, we're talking about failing infrastructure. And you've heard about that and heard about that and heard about that. They really are failing. And they're failing just as badly at the small and medium-sized water utilities as at the large ones. One of the challenges the EPA has, if you had 10 bad actors, and you were looking at, say, the prison system, if you had 10 bad actors out of 50, you can zero in and be darn near punitive if you want to take care of it. But if you have 10,000, and in fact, if you look at it, the EPA deems 3,000 water suppliers as being significantly out of compliance. And that is significant enough as to cause health problems. 3,000, okay? And on the sewage treatment side, there are 4,000 consistently non-compliant. So you're talking about thousands of bad actors. I don't think they want to be bad actors, and I think what you're going to hear about today is they're kind of stranded. They don't have an ecosystem to support them. They're also facing accelerating challenges, the shrinking availability of feedstock. Feedstock meaning, where do you get the water from? So San Francisco, some of the dry climates, places like that. But water tables are also dropping. You have climate change that's driving that, so you get different weather patterns. But you also have population. I'm not going to tell you how old I am, but the U.S. population is twice today what it was on the day I was born. So we have twice as many human beings in the United States. We don't have twice as much water. There aren't 2 Lake Michigans. There aren't 2 Mississippi rivers. And the water tables that exist are actually dropping, which, by the way, costs more money to pump them up. So you've got shrinking availability of feedstock, you've got tightening discharge standards, you hear about PFAS, and on the discharge side you have nutrient limitations and things like that. So the standards are getting harder. So you're these small water utilities, water and sewer utilities, you're having a hard time getting your water, you have tougher regulations, regulatory standards, and the infrastructure that you have is horribly out of condition because of deferred maintenance. If that's not bad enough, you've got a silver tsunami going on. Roughly 10% of water operators have gray hair like I do and are retiring and coming out. And candidly, a lot of engineering schools are having hard times convincing people to go into this space. So if it's not bad enough that you're a small or medium-sized player, but you also don't have some of your best operators who have known how to kick and bang and put a little duct tape on your systems over the years, and they're going away. So what is the ecosystem that surrounds these municipalities and these water providers to help them? Well, it kind of comes down to technologies, service providers, and capital resources. There's good news and bad news in this. As you'd heard in the previous panel, technology isn't the problem. That's kind of true. It's technology at the right scale that is the problem for these mid-level players. So if you're New York City or you're San Francisco, yeah, you can go get somebody to create a bespoke solution for you and sort of brute force bring together some really cool technologies to get it done. But what if you're Jackson, Mississippi? Or what if you're some small or medium-sized water player? Can you actually go do research and get that done and bring MBR technology? The answer is not really, not in a cost-effective, user-friendly way. How about service providers? There's a phenomenal ecosystem of great engineers, consultants, and advisors, but they're generally geared up for the big players, not the medium and small players. It's kind of a repetitive theme here. And then same thing with capital sources. There is tons and tons of money that wants to get put to work to fix this. But generally speaking, it comes in big doses and it doesn't know how to get itself put in action in the small and medium size. So again, the theme here is good news and bad news. There's tons of resources, but they're not really at the scale that we need. And the service providers tend to be, what we see is you're either going to have very large-scale service providers or, candidly, a lot of really tiny mom and pops in regions. And those mom and pop service providers, think contractors, vendors, and things like that, are they up to speed with all the technologies that exist? The answer is not really. So finally, what's the future? And this is what you're going to hear about. It's really rolling up service providers and rolling down technologies, trying to bring the best technologies in packaged systems that are digestible by less than sophisticated water utilities. By the way, I'm not talking about stupid people when I say less sophisticated. I mean people who oftentimes have another day job, but yet they oversee this, right? So the technology has to be digestible in a package size that they can use. Same thing with the service providers. You've got to bring design, manufacture, install, ongoing support in a digestible fashion, but not at a mom and pop level, right? Because the challenges that these water providers are facing are significant. So you can't rely on the guy who pours sidewalks and driveways to fix your sewage treatment plant. It doesn't work that way. And then finally, capital sources. We've got to be able to bring efficient money, private sector, government, public sector, whatever it's going to be, but efficient forms of capital sized in this sort of Goldilocks range. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Bill, who will take us through the private capital side.
Thanks, Tom. So I was asked to talk a little about the role of private capital and the need for it in the water industry, and I want to start by kind of reiterating some of the issues we've heard about today that are really facing the water utility industry. And we all know about aging infrastructure, the public sees burst water mains. What they don't see is the infrastructure that's at the treatment plant that's decaying and falling apart. Can you still hear me? It's decaying and falling apart. Regulatory compliance is a huge thing. The PFAS regulation that EPA is putting out is just the latest example of regulations. They're working on many others, new disinfection byproduct regulations, et cetera, et cetera. Dwindling water supplies, climate change, extreme weather events. These affect large utilities as well as small utilities. And operations of water systems today is way more complex than it was. Many of these plants were designed and built 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago when regulations were quite different than they are today. So these are putting pressure on all utilities, but smaller, mid-sized utilities are facing the greatest amount of pressure because they just don't have the staffing or the expertise to deal with this type of issues that are coming and are here. The other big issue that got some airtime today, and I'm glad to see it more and more, is that of utility governance. There's three main buckets, right? There's municipally owned systems. Those are systems where you have local control. And there's examples of each one of these. There's authorities, there's privatized systems, there's advantages, disadvantages, there's great examples of successful and unsuccessful cases in each of these here. Authorities are nice because they are multi-jurisdictional. So in a municipality, you have local control, but you also have more influence from local politicians when they decide not to raise rates because they want to run for re-election. That's not good for the operation of water utility. Authority is a little better than that. And then there's the private sector. And where does the private sector come into the water industry? Again, three different real areas. There's private ownership. So there's a lot of utilities in the country, not a lot, actually, about 12% of the population served by private utilities in the US. There's contract operations, heard a little about that earlier from Veolia, they talked about that. And then there's different type where, and the advantage of that is that the municipality still owns the utility, but they're contracting out the complex operations. And then there's different forms of alternative deliveries that we won't really get into, but different types of PPPs. Design, build, own, transfer, et cetera, et cetera. And so what are the solutions to this? First, I think you really have to look at consolidation. That's job number one for the US to get the water industry where it needs to be, is consolidation. And I'll talk about each of these to some degree, but on this next slide, I kind of want to paint that picture. Tom mentioned there's 50,000 water utilities in the US. And you can see the breakdown of them here from EPA data. More than half of them serve very, very small water systems, less than 500 people. Right? That's like 1% of the population. Small utilities, less than 3,300 altogether. That adds another 26%. So about 80% of the population. About 80% of the population, hey, how do I get this back? About 80% of the population, I got this, there we go. Sorry, the screen went away for a minute when it told me to speak into the microphone. 80% of the population is served by these small systems, and they just don't have the resources to hire the best consulting firms, to get the best contractors, to build the systems that are needed, and to comply with all of EPA regulations, deal with aging infrastructure, and everything else. It's really only the large and very large systems, which make up the smallest amount of utilities, so about 4,500 altogether. Less than 10% of the population is served by these large utilities. Now, if we contrast that with the electrical industry, we see the opposite. Okay? Altogether, there's only about 3,000 utilities, companies in the entire country. Investor-owned utilities serve about 72% of those. Okay? And there's only 168 investor-owned water utilities. So in the electrical industry, we have probably where the water industry kind of needs to go. How to get there is a whole different story, but there needs to be consolidation, and it needs to be probably private companies buying a lot of these smaller utilities so that they can serve them in a meaningful way. The other technical solution is water reuse. The last panel talked about water reuse. I want to dive into that a little more. There's a fascinating project, maybe you've heard of it or not. It's a larger scale project. It's called SWIFT, the Sustainable Water Initiative for Tomorrow. It's down in the Tidewater, Virginia area, and it's served by Hampton Roads Sanitation. And down there, that's the part of the country that's the most susceptible to sea level rise, because not only is the sea level rising, but the ground is actually subsiding. And it's subsiding because of overpumping of groundwater that's been used for drinking water over the years. At the same time, that area discharges its wastewater to the Chesapeake Bay. There's increasing nutrient removal requirements for that wastewater. And so they came up with this concept of treating the wastewater to the advanced processes to remove all the nutrients from the water. They thought, well, why don't we just add a little more treatment on that and then take that water and instead of discharging it to the Chesapeake Bay, pump it back down into the ground where it will be recycled several months later for drinking water. So it solves the discharge issue, it solves water supply issue, it helps with saltwater intrusion, and it helps with groundwater subsidence. So it's an example, and it's a public and private partnership in this, and at the first big project, 20 MGD wastewater plants being converted. They've already done research, they built a demonstration scale project, and that was done with design build, so public-private partnership concept. Advanced equipment, we talked about that earlier today. I think one of the more exciting areas is advanced sensors that can be used, especially if you think about water reuse or even drinking water. Can you put sensors out in distribution systems to do real-time monitoring so that the utility is aware if there's an issue somewhere and they can remedy it quickly? Also needs to be monetary solutions. We heard earlier there's $1 trillion is needed over the next bunch of years. EPA did step up. $55 billion is not insignificant, but it's still a proverbial drop in a bucket of what's needed in a water industry. So there absolutely needs to be more private participation in the water industry to solve these problems. And with that, I'll turn it over to Alex, who will talk about an example of a company that's stepping up and doing just that.
Thanks, Bill. So just by way of introduction, my name is Alex Buehler. I'm the president and CEO of Integrated Water Services, AKA IWS. I thought Tom did a wonderful job in framing the magnitude of the challenge that we face. And then Bill talked about the need and place for private capital. What I'd like to do is talk about a case study of our company, IWS, who is backed by private capital that is working to build a national treatment platform to serve the middle market. So I'm going to start admittedly at a very high level, just to frame the business. Who is IWS today? Well, we are a design build business, building and servicing water and wastewater treatment plants. Again, we're focused on this middle market space. You're going to hear me say that a lot, but it's at great design. It's very deliberate. The middle market space, these are small and medium-sized facilities, often existing in a decentralized ecosystem. To zoom out here at 50,000 feet, our purpose, which is our raison d'etre, our reason for being, why we show up for work every day beyond earning a paycheck, is to protect the world's water resources while balancing sustainability with economics. And that balancing equation is very important, right? Sustainability is great, but everything, obviously in the private sector, must stand on its own 2 feet economically. That is to say, there must be an IRR, a payback, and return on investment. Our vision, as we look out 5 years, proverbially, what do we want to be when we grow up? We want to become the premier provider of water and wastewater treatment solutions for existing plants that are overlooked and uncontested. Again, that's that middle market space. We consider that a blue ocean. We are not concerned with the large municipalities like Chicago, DC. We'll let the large players fight it out for those opportunities. And then, of course, we are guided by our core values, of which 5 are listed, examples of which are pioneering and purposeful. So again, at a high level, IWS at a glance, by the numbers, we're a small but scrappy business, about $70 million in revenue, albeit high growth. We've demonstrated an organic CAGR over the last 3 years of about 30%. We have just over 100 employees. Geographically, we're centered in the western U.S., so our legacy business, headquartered in Denver, covers the Rocky Mountain area. We also have business on the West Coast, both in Northern and Southern California, and then more recently in Central Texas, really on that I-35 corridor between Austin and San Antonio, which for us represents the perfect confluence of events: population growth, increasing regulation, water scarcity, and expansive residential development. Our legacy business is largely municipal, and you can see in that space we've completed over 400 projects, again in the middle market, over our 20 years in business. We have been backed by, owned by Sciens since about 2020. So over the last year, we've been working diligently to establish a foundation for growth. And that really starts with a clear definition of our strategy. Our strategy is bold, it's ambitious. We are trying to build the quintessential wastewater treatment and water reuse platform. This platform will have a national footprint, and again, it will be centered and covering the middle market space that is largely underserved and uncontested. And we're going to be covering that space with turnkey solutions through a bundled sale. After defining our strategy, we resourced and appointed a management team. And this team has deep and relevant experience, both in private equity as well as water and wastewater. We have experience both on the products and on the services side, and this team brings to bear a very heavy orientation toward growth, inclusive of both organic and acquisitive growth. And most importantly, the team has a record of deep value creation established across several businesses, some of the brands of which you'll see on the bottom of the slide. And then finally, in terms of the foundation, we have worked to establish a performance management culture driven by transparency and accountability, but also crystallizing our strategic focus, moving at pace, embracing commercial intensity with a real execution discipline. And then we are obsessed with excellence and continuous improvement. So I told you initially our legacy is really in the municipal market. We are shifting our revenue mix toward commercial and industrial end markets. So our areas of interest include residential development, resorts, tribal projects, and other commercial and industrial opportunities, almost all of which, again, exist in a decentralized environment. A typical case study of one of our projects, and this really illustrates the benefit of turnkey solutions, it might start out with a small feasibility study and quick engineering assessment. That might then spawn a full engineering proposal. We then often find ourselves renting or selling equipment on an emergency basis. Then we enter a discussion about project financing, about procurement of other items of equipment, turnkey installation, commissioning, and aftermarket services, which often include an O&M component. In the last session on water reuse, we talked a little bit about MBR systems. IWS birthed a system called Blue Box, which is a membrane bioreactor, a packaged, modular, scalable treatment system. This slide shows an interesting juxtaposition of the two models, right? On the left of the slide, you'll see the traditional model. These are large, highly customized systems. They're reliant on a contracting model that is design, bid, build. This model is very expensive, it's slow-moving, it's bureaucratic, and often litigious. And let's face it, when you look at the left side of this image, it favors these white elephant designs, sprawling footprints, and concrete monuments. You compare that with the right side of the slide, right? These are middle market solutions that are scaled down or rolled down, as Tom said earlier. The middle market requires these solutions to serve their needs, and these solutions start with the fact that they are standardized and modularized, making them smaller, cheaper, and faster. We're able to partner those or pair those with capital solutions so that we can overcome capital constraints or other sales objections. We're also able to wrap around them the integration of controls and automation to make them easy to run and maintain. So again, on the right side of this slide, you see that Blue Box product. That's a packaged, modular, and scalable MBR system that is befitting for the middle market. Obviously, our business has a real measurable ESG impact. There's really no need for greenwashing here. We sort of sit right in the center of water and wastewater treatment. On the environmental side, we offer a 98% reduction in contaminants. That's real. It's documented and proven. On the social side, we are providing clean water and sanitation to communities that would not otherwise enjoy it. And on the governance side, we are preventing non-compliance issues. It is true that our plants do not have any documented compliance issues. Needless to say, this is a big market, right? You could look at the TAM, it's about 20 billion. That's the total addressable market. It's high growth at about 7% CAGR. That's about double the rate of GDP growth. And of course, it's backed by regulatory tailwinds and ESG dimensions. We like to follow the money here through these pie charts. So when you look at that spending, that 20 billion, look where it's going. 85%, nearly 90% is going toward upgrades and replacements. About 70% or two-thirds is going toward the industrial market. About 60% is going to the middle market, comprised of small and medium-sized systems, and over 40% is going to biological processes as a component of those systems. So again, we're following the money and tracing back to the core competencies of our business. And this really informs our strategy today, which is we are focusing on the modernization of existing plants in the middle market, in the industrial segment, with differentiated product solutions for biological systems. We also believe we have a clear and compelling value proposition. As Tom said up front, we've got technical expertise that is sized appropriately for the middle market. So we can handle the permitting needs, design, equipment provision, construction, monitoring, service, and support. We're forming a national footprint, which allows us to serve strategic customers with multiple sites across the country from master contract vehicles. And then again, we're offering capital solutions to overcome any constraints on that side. And then probably most importantly on this slide is the speed of delivery. We can deploy a unit with minimal lead time on an emergency basis as needed. We also have a differentiated strategy to accelerate growth. We call it a 4+4 strategy. We've got 4 strategic imperatives, which are our growth drivers, and 4 strategic enablers, which are really corporate disciplines that allow us to accelerate growth. The strategic imperatives are differentiated product solutions, high-value services, and market diversification and geographic expansion. And our strategic enablers are talent acquisition and retention, world-class sales and marketing, corporate development proficiency, and operational excellence. So you can see these 4x4 combined to produce significant growth and value creation in the center. So as we step back and think about IWS in the future, and I'm thinking 2027 here, what are we looking at? Well, we're looking at a much larger business consisting of about $600 million in revenue. So growing this business 9 to 10x, yes, seems bold and ambitious. Just keep in mind this model is heavily reliant on mergers and acquisitions. When you look at the revenue mix, about half of it is based on product solutions, and over half of it is commercial and industrial. You'll see we've got a national footprint comprised of about 1,500 employees, still headquartered in Denver, serving the market through 9 satellite offices in attractive service locations. We go to market with 3 divisions. We have product solutions, technical and digital services, and field services. So what is this? It's a scaled treatment business serving the middle market, also with vertical integration of manufacturing capabilities. So stepping back from all of this, this seems to be a nice case study of how private capital can combine with management and strategy to address what is a daunting challenge. So let me summarize the full panel, all 3 speakers. Tom kicked us off and talked about kind of the magnitude of the problem and some of the challenges facing us today. Things like profound fragmentation, deeply degraded infrastructure, and increasing regulations, which together, again, create a significant challenge to address. Bill talked about the need for and the place of private capital to play a part in addressing these solutions. And what I tried to draw on here is a case study for integrated water services, or IWS. We think we have the right thesis. We think the timing is right to launch this platform. We've got a clear and cogent strategy in place. We've built the right management team, and execution is now underway with pace and intensity. So with the right market, strategy, value proposition, and execution, we think we can deliver significant value creation and sustainable impact. Thanks, everybody.